right, should we get started? Yeah. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started. I'm Scott Wagnon. If anyone that's new, a physician associate at the Community Health Centers of Lane County, and welcome to class. How many people are here for the first time? Couple. All right. And how many were here last week? All right. Good percentage. Okay. Well, before we get started, tonight it's going to be part 1 of 2 on weight management. I'm going to talk primarily about calorie density tonight. And then next week, Charlie will do kind of part 2 of weight management. And then in 2 weeks, this is going to be part 2 of my PowerPoint I'm going to show you tonight on food addiction and behavior change. So that's kind of mine is kind of in 2 parts, but tonight we're going to focus on calorie density. So does anyone have any, like the new people, how they heard about the class or anything anyone else wants to share before we start? Or does anyone have any a success, a challenge, anything?
Down 20 pounds.
Oh, good. All right. Excellent. All right. Hey. Yeah. Oh, great. That's great. Yeah, we're always trying to do outreach. This next weekend, we're at the Eugene Health and Wellness Expo, which is next Saturday and Sunday. This will be our 3rd year. Eugene Plant-Based Providers had a booth there, and so Charlie and I will be speaking, giving a presentation at 3 o'clock on Saturday and 2 o'clock on Sunday. So even though you might have heard us talk before, it's nice to have some of you guys there just to kind of for support and have other people. Because when we noticed the last couple of years, like more people kind of start gathering around, more people, oh, let's go check this out. So that'd be great, even though you guys kind of know what we're going to talk about. But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I belong to the group Veggies.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I knew about you guys. So if anybody doesn't know about that, it's a meetup group and it's called Eugene Veggies. You can look up on the app, and they try to do stuff at least once a month, and it's all about plant-based. Good group.
Great. Right.
Yeah. The first time I ever met you was I didn't go this year. I was out of town, but I think it was last year's.
Yeah.
That first time I'd met you.
Yeah. Great. And then for the new people, you can go onto the class website and start at the beginning. 2 weeks ago was my introduction class, so you can watch the recording of that. And then just check out the website, livelifestylemedicine.com. There's a website tutorial I've recorded on the homepage just to kind of get all the information about how to use the website, where to find everything. You can do that. And then are you guys doing okay in the online? We have people online too. So if you can't make it here, you can also attend on Zoom. Let me go to.
I just wanted to add one
thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Shout out to the Grange. Become a member of the Grange, and I get this Oregon State Grange newsletter or newspaper, and in it, it says Blue Zones recap from news from the convention. So it looks like the Grange is understanding the importance of the blue zones. Do you all know what the blue zones are? Longest lived, healthiest people, mainly plant-based communities, and like about 95% or so. And so I was really thrilled to see that in this newsletter.
Is there a way to see, and can the people in the Zoom see the screen, the PowerPoint? Is there a way to
Let's see if there's a way.
I think I did it okay.
Okay, anybody, can you see the screen on the PowerPoint? Yes or no?
No.
We're going to share the screen.
Yeah, no, we're talking.
Okay.
There we go.
And we're going to share it. And then let's go back over here to PowerPoint. You should be able to see it now. Yes, speak up.
Yes, I can see it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect.
You're gonna be, so now we're good to go. Okay. So weight management, and then also talk in 2 weeks about food addiction and behavior change. So a couple quotes. We don't change the direction in which we are going, we will end up where we are headed. You know, one of those red skeletons. You guys don't, some of the older people might know who he is. He kind of always said the obvious things, kind of funny. And then C.S. Lewis, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. All right. Before I go into calorie density, I just kind of want, I think this is really important to talk about kind of the diet mentality versus a health mentality. And I think that's really important when we're getting into things like, you know, trying to lose weight, get a healthy weight, even things like, you know, mental health, food addiction, some of the things we'll talk about over the next few weeks to kind of get in the right mindset. So a diet mentality focuses on kind of kind of like the negative things. And anyone that's been on a diet could probably relate to this. So food is the enemy. You focus on your bad habits, things I'm only doing temporarily, things I don't like about myself, the weight on the scale, kind of where's the finish line, kind of focusing on those things where we really need to embrace a healthy lifestyle and healthy mentality focuses on food as fuel, my good habits, things I'm doing forever, things that I want for myself, the daily choices, and a lifelong journey. So I think it's important to kind of stay on the right-hand side and just kind of focus on those things as best that we can. But it is easy to slip back into that diet mentality. All right, so I'm going to start off talking about how our appetite works and just kind of more from a physiologic standpoint. So essentially, we have, I don't know if you're aware, in our stomach, we have little stretch receptors. So we have two different mechanisms that help to control our appetite. So what sends a signal to our brain, and there's several different hormones like CCK and ghrelin and leptin. There's these different hormones. And how they get triggered is two different mechanisms. We have little stretch receptors on the outside of our stomach lining. And as our stomach expands and gets filled up with whether it's liquid or food, actually it stretches it. And as it stretches, there's these little pressure receptors, baroreceptors. And as that stretches out, that sends signals to the brain, specifically leptin and CCK. But leptin is what makes you feel full hormone, and ghrelin is, think of G for ghrelin is like your stomach's growling. So it's what makes you feel hungry. And then leptin is what makes you kind of feel full. And CCK plays a part too, it's cholecystokinin. But essentially then, as that stomach stretches, sends a signal to the brain, says, okay, you're full, you don't need to eat anymore, and so you're full. But if you think about just that one mechanism, that wouldn't be enough, would it? Because what if you just drank water and just completely filled your stomach with water? That would trigger the baroreceptors and send the signal to say you're full. But kind of biologically, we would survive with that, would we? Because we wouldn't have any calories and we'd feel full. And so we as a species, we wouldn't have survived. But we have another mechanism, and it's called, there's different names for it. There's nutrient density receptor, calorie density receptor. So basically our stomach also knows if there's something, you know, with a lot of calories in there versus a low amount of calories in there. And one of the experiments I like to kind of demonstrate that is, so everyone kind of hold up both their fists in front of them like this. Okay. So pretend that your left fist is a clump of kale, and then the right fist is a clump of cheesecake. So you have kale and cheesecake. And so if you ate each of one of those at different times, which one do you think would make you feel full more? The exact same size, right? That would it be the cheesecake, or would it be the kale that would make you feel more full? Cheesecake, right? Yeah, it's an easy question, right? And so when we think about it, when we've eaten cheesecake, you're just like, it's really rich, right? You eat and you're kind of like, ugh, I'm full. That was really rich. That's the density receptor working, the calorie density and nutrient density receptors working there, because your body knows that's really rich. There's a huge load of calories in there. So that's also playing a role in making us feel satiated. So, you know, there's satiety is a kind of a Latin term for feeling full and satisfied, right? So satiation, satiety. So that's what we're all after is satiety, and that's what we're basically programmed to do biologically. And so if you think about it, it's pretty amazing. If you look at, I talk about this a little bit in the nutritional myths class a bit, and other popular diets class. But if like our taste buds and our tongue are so sensitive that you can tell the difference between an 80, like if you took two different apples, one's more ripe than the other one, and one apple might be 80 calories or maybe 20 calories a bite, because apples are pretty low in calories, but your body knows the difference between a 10 calorie a bite versus a 20 calorie a bite, or even 15 calories a bite. You'll want the one that's 15 calories a bite more than you'll want the one that's 10 calories a bite. That's how sensitive our taste buds are, because it's for survival. It's like, oh, there's more calories per bite, so you have to use less energy to get the same amount of calories, right? So you don't want to be eating kale all day, because it would take so much energy to chew all that, and there would hardly be any calories in the kale, and it would never get enough calories. You'd be better off just staying back in the cave and not going out and foraging. So you actually were designed to want more calories per bite and things like that. So any questions about, that's just the basics of appetite and how that, because it's going to play an important role when we start talking about calorie density. Does anyone have any questions about how the appetite works and the satiety or any of that thing? Makes sense? Yeah, go ahead. Bad bugs. Yeah, there is some research on that, but having a healthy microbiome in the gut, how the gut microbiome communicates with the brain and stuff, but I don't know a lot about, if it has anything to do with our appetite. We know that the gut microbiome plays a huge role in how much inflammation we have in our body, and the short chain fatty acids like butyrate and all that feeds our colon wall, and only the bugs that are selected for when we eat fiber, whole plant foods, are the ones that make most of the butyrate, which calms down inflammation. And so we have a whole class like on fiber. We talk about that a lot, but I don't know anything specific about, satiety and the gut bugs necessarily. Yeah, and then, so I think next is behavior change and food addiction play a big role. So I don't want to downplay that, because, we have this physiology, but we can kind of push past that if you think about it. So how many times have we all eaten a meal, we're full, and we go like, yeah, I'm full, I don't want to eat anymore, but then the cake comes out or the dessert comes out, there's always going to be room, right? It's like, oh, I can eat a little bit of that, because so that comes into dopamine in our brain, and a little bit when we talk about food addiction and some of the behavior change stuff, that kind of plays a role there. So yeah, I don't want to downplay that, and we'll focus on that in a couple of weeks. But so yeah, we definitely eat when we're not hungry. Sometimes, a lot of times, we eat. Some people eat for comfort. Some people really have food addiction issues. Some people just kind of like, whether it's a stressful day or a good day, they kind of want foods that are high in calories, high calorie density, high in sugar, salt, and fat, because it's a drug-like effect. So dopamine, and we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. So I wanted to mention it briefly here, just because it does play a part in our appetite. Because even though it's pushing beyond physiology, it's still, our brain's still part of our physiology, but it's just the high calorie density foods, high in sugar, salt, and fat, kind of hijack that system. So we're, because 20,000 years ago, we didn't have Twinkies and donuts and all these things. And so that's kind of the pleasure trap. Are you guys familiar with the book, The Pleasure Trap? That's a really good one. It's on the book list on the class website, but it talks a lot about that. And so, yeah, our emotions, both mental and physical, play a role. And then I just wanted to mention on the class website, How Not to Diet book. So since we're focusing on weight loss, that's a really good book. And then if you don't want to spend the time reading the entire How Not to Diet book by Dr. Greger, he does have the 21 tweaks for weight loss on his app. So the Daily Dozen app also has a section on the 21 tweaks for weight loss. And so it's kind of like the cliff notes of the book. So you can just go through all of those, and it's amazing. It's all evidence-based information on helping to lose weight. And it just didn't see the light of day. He scours the studies, and really good studies in a lot of these, and they just don't see the light of day because they're things that cost pennies, like a tablespoon of vinegar and all these, because it has CCK, which we talked about with the appetite. And so there's all these things, or these little gems out there in the literature that can help with weight loss, especially if you do multiple of them. And one of the 21 tweaks is the calorie density, which we're going to talk about tonight. But they don't see the light of day because nobody's going to push a marketing for these things because they don't cost anything. Like, it's pennies a day. So it's, of course it's not going to have a marketing campaign behind it. So, but it's really good studies on it as well. So I wanted to mention that. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and talk about calorie density, and the graph that we're going to spend a lot of time on before I show some videos is on the class website. So if you go, those of you who were here last week, I kind of showed where a lot of the stuff is. And again, you can go to the homepage and look at the website tutorial recorded on the homepage to get a full tour of where everything is on the website. But under handouts for classes, if you remember last week, I kind of showed that when I was going over the meal preparation and planning stuff. There is an article on calorie density there. And there's also this graph that I'm going to be spending a bunch of time on the next screen. It's in color. That's also there, so you can print it or just look at it whenever you want. It's there on the website. So I wanted to mention that. So calorie density. So what is calorie density? So calorie density is simply the number of calories in a given weight of food. And so in science, and when they do nutrition studies, and a lot of I don't know if you've heard of Barbara Rolls. She's a PhD nutritionist out of Penn State. And she wrote this book, read it a long time ago, but she wrote a book, Volumetrics is what it's called. And I'm going to be showing Jeff Novick, a dietitian, his kind of lecture on it. And I'm going to be showing little bits of Jeff Novick's lecture tonight. And the full lecture is on the class website under the videos section. So I'll refer to that again in a little bit. But so that's where a lot of the science of the research comes from on calorie density is Barbara Rolls at Penn State. And so in science, when they do studies, they do calories per gram because it's a little more accurate. And so, but who really understands gram? What's 100 grams look like? What's 400 grams look like? And I think it's like, what, 354 grams in a pound or something like that. So I mean, it's hard to kind of wrap our minds around that. So when we teach it in class, we teach it as calories per pound because it's a little bit easier to understand a pound. I mean, you take, go to the grocery store and you take, 2 medium-sized Yukon Gold potatoes and put it in the scale, it's about a pound, right? So now you can visualize, oh, that's a pound of potatoes. And so a pound of potatoes is about 400 calories. So in case you wanted to know, and I'll show you the graph in a minute. So it's just the number of calories in a given weight of food. And in this case tonight, it's going to all be in calories per pound. And so think about, okay, and I'll show you this graph in a minute. Actually, I can just go ahead and flip to the graph. I don't know if you can see it very well. I'll read it off so you don't have to, so you can squint to see what the calories are in a pound of food from the left to the right. So on the left is the lowest calorie density, and on the right is the highest in calorie density. And so the first time I looked at this, so first I'll talk to you about, so vegetables are about 100 calories in a pound, and oil is about 4,000 calories in a pound. And so you have the extreme, right? So oil is the most calorie dense food on the planet. And it doesn't matter if it's olive oil, motor oil, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, doesn't matter. It's all 4,000 calories a pound, which equates to about 125 calories in a teaspoon or tablespoon. And a tablespoon of olive oil is about 125 calories. And so the first time I looked at this though, I was kind of like, well, who cares? Butter is 3,200 calories in a pound, but when have I ever eaten a pound of butter, right? Or I've never eaten a pound of oil. Chips are about 2,300 calories in a pound. It's like, well, I don't think I've ever eaten a pound of chips either. So who cares, right? I mean, that's kind of what I thought the first time I saw this. And it's like, but it does really matter because, when you're thinking about, how we're told that we should lose weight is to, portion control, like just cut down our portions and balance, we can eat, there's no bad foods. Let's just eat whatever, but let's just cut our portions. And I'll give you examples of how that doesn't work very well. And when you're trying to estimate calories, like a lot of times people will go on a, 1,200 calorie a day diet or 1,500 calorie a day diet or whatever. And if you actually test out those kinds of strategies, they don't work because one, even a seasoned dietitian is not very good at estimating the number of calories in a meal or on a plate, because it's just not it's just very difficult to do. But if you understand calorie density, you'll never have to worry about how many calories are on my plate, what size portions am I eating, to weigh your food, all these things. You don't even have to do that, because all you need to understand is what the calorie density is of the groups of foods you're eating. And you don't have to memorize these. It's just a matter of, you'll kind of get an idea of how, Charlie and I are teaching to eat a whole food plant-based diet. You're automatically going to be in the ideal area for calorie density. And it is so important, because it doesn't matter if you're eating, a handful of this versus a handful of that, you'd always have to know exactly how much this weighs and how many calories are in that amount of food. Whereas with calorie density never changes. So it doesn't, whether you eat a handful or 10 handfuls, the calorie density will never change. It's always the same. And so the only thing that changes is how much of it you eat would determine how many calories you get. But what's so liberating when you understand calorie density, because it's a math constant. In math, you always want to have like a constant. And so calorie density will never change. And so it makes it really easy to go, oh, if it's below a certain number of calories per pound, I can eat as much as I want. And I'll have, at the last slide I'll have tonight, I'll give you what are called the calorie breakouts for the zones of where you can, and what the studies showed that Barbara Rolls and some of them did at Penn State. And so what's great is some of these studies they did is they did feeding experiments where they locked people up in 5-star hotels, sometimes up to a month, paid people to do this. And so in every experiment were what are called ad libitum experiments, which means in Latin means you can eat as much as you want. So there was no restriction. Don't eat as much as you want. Don't stuff yourself, but eat until you feel satisfied. Just eat as much as you want. And they tracked people, and then when they manipulated the calorie density of the foods they had to choose from, it made a huge difference in how many calories people ended up consuming and how much weight they lost and things like that. So calorie density is, when I learned it, it's just mind-blowing. It's just like when you understand it, it's like, it's so liberating. You feel empowered, and that's what I'm hoping you'll take away as we get into this. So yeah, if you lined up every food in the grocery store, then end to end, least calorie dense to most calorie dense, you would have more than a 40-fold difference in calorie density. Can you see that? So if you're 100 calories a pound for vegetables, 4,000 calories a pound for oil, do you see how that's a 40-fold difference in the calorie density? And some vegetables are even less than 100 calories in a pound. Like I think kale's about 70 calories in a pound. So think about that. A whole pound of kale would be a lot, right? If you actually weighed a whole pound of kale, if you ate all that, you'd be like, oh, I mean, that would be hard. You'd be chewing all day, and that's only 70 calories. And so you can see how much of a difference it is between those things. So I'm going to go ahead and run through these, and it's supposed to be green, yellow, and red, similar to the traffic light, but I know the yellow kind of looks more orange, and I actually got this from Craig McDougall. So Craig McDougall, John McDougall's son. So Jeff Novick, dietitian, he always taught at Dr. McDougall's programs, and his living programs, and his online one more recently. And I got to know and shadowed Craig McDougall, but actually before I ever met John McDougall. So I actually got this from Craig McDougall, who got this from Jeff Novick, because it's at his dad's conferences. But that's where I actually got this. But and so we'll start off on the left. So you all know that. So vegetables are 100 calories in a pound. Fruit's about 300 calories a pound. And so we'll go back and forth. And then tubers, which are your potatoes, sweet potatoes, even like corn, squash, be more kind of in that realm, about 400 calories a pound. Whole grains, what that means is not like a refined grain, but a intact whole grain. So if you guys ever been to like Winco or Market of Choice and see the bulk bins full of all the ancient grains like barley and sorghum and farro and amaranth and quinoa and brown rice. And so that's what an intact grain is. And so intact grains are about 500 calories a pound. Tofu is about 500 calories a pound. It has it's supposed to be yellow because it's minimally processed, right? It's not edamame. So edamame would be a legume, which is actually about 600 calories in a pound, because it would be a little bit more volume to eat. 600 calories worth of a pound of edamame would take up more space than a pound of tofu, because tofu has a lot of water weight and stuff in it. So that's why it's a little bit less than the legumes. The legumes about, so beans and legumes, 600 calories a pound. Pasta is about 600 calories a pound. You might be surprised by that because if pasta is 600 calories a pound, if you look, you're jumping ahead at all, we'll get to it. But bread's 1,200 calories a pound. So that might surprise a lot of you because bread's 1,200 calories a pound, but pasta is only 600 calories a pound. Does anybody have an idea as to why pasta is half the calorie density as bread? Yes. Water, perfect, you got it. So a lot of the weight of pasta, this is cooked, ready to eat pasta, it's got a lot of the weight is water, so that's why it's half the calorie density as bread. So that's a great point. And then avocado is about 700 calories a pound. So, again, yellow light foods are healthy, but just getting a little high in calorie density. And then you might be surprised here. So poultry, eggs, and fish are about 700 calories a pound. Beef is about 1,000 calories a pound. But if you go to a restaurant and get a steak, it's about 1,200 calories a pound. And so you might be surprised, well, why are poultry, eggs, and fish red light, even though they're only 700 calories a pound? Why do they get the red light? Well, because of the other health reasons you learn about in these classes. There's no fiber. There's the saturated fat, the cholesterol. There's not as many nutrients per bite, in weight and stuff. So it has other health risks associated with it. Why it gets a red light, but it doesn't really get a red light when it comes to you're just thinking about calorie density. And this kind of goes back to think about if you went back in a time machine 150 years or something, people were eating some of those, right? People were eating meat and eggs, and there was really not hardly any overweight people. Like if you go back even into the 50s and look at a shot of a beach in the summer, you would hardly ever see anyone that's overweight because these foods really weren't part of people's diets yet. They were eating some animal products, but animal products aren't that high in calorie density compared to the processed foods because, well, why? Because it's not processed, right? It's just it is a whole food. So it's going to be a little bit lower in calorie density. So any questions so far with how we're progressing through here? It's making sense so far? And then now we're getting into things a little more processed. So tortillas, like bread, tortillas are about 1,000 calories a pound. Ice cream is also about 1,000 calories a pound. So why do you think ice cream has the same calorie density as tortillas? What is it that's the difference between ice cream and tortillas? Because that might shock some of you. Liquid, right? Yeah, so there's water. So it's the water again, right? So there's a lot of the weight of ice cream, even though it's got a lot of fat, sugar, salt, it's not healthy at all, right? So tortilla is a better choice, but still the same calorie density because the tortilla is dry. It's all dry and it's just more refined. So obviously a tortilla gets a yellow light, ice cream gets a red light because obviously a tortilla is a better choice than ice cream, but that's why the difference in the color, but the calorie density is the same. And when I go into some videos with Jeff Novick, he's going to be showing you examples of same number of calories on the right and on the left, which one is going to fill you up more. That's what he's going to go through so we'll be able to visualize all this, and this will make more sense as we visualize things. I just kind of wanted to give you some background running through this. And then dried fruit is 1,200 calories a pound. So why is fresh fruit, 300 calories a pound, and dried fruit's 1,200 calories a pound? Any guesses why? It's about the same amount of sugar. Volume, yeah, taking the water out. So volume, yeah. Because if you take the water out, now you've shrunk it way down. So now the water weight was why fruit was only 300 calories a pound. It doesn't make dried fruit unhealthy. It's just if you're trying to lose weight, you don't want to be snacking on a whole bunch of dried fruit. So like if you think about it, it would be really easy to eat 5 apples worth of dried apples, right? That would be easy. You're hungry, you're on a hike or something like that. It's a great snack. There's nothing wrong with it. It's healthy. But could you sit down on a bench and eat 5 apples? No, you'd just be like, oh, it's like so full because of all the volume, all the water, and it has the same amount of sugar, same amount of fiber, same amount of nutrients. There's really no difference. There's just the difference in the calorie density is the difference because of the water weight in the fresh fruit versus the dried fruit. And then now we're into, so cheese is about 1,700 calories a pound. Sugar is 1,700 calories a pound. So kind of similar to the ice cream and the tortilla, cheese lots of salt, lots of fat, no fiber, but it has water. So that's why it's the same calorie density as sugar, which is just dry weight of sugar. And, people think about, we always blame carbs and stuff. It's like, well, really not. I mean, sugar's junk and it's 1,700 calories a pound, but when people think, oh, it's the sugar or the carbs that made me overweight or why I have diabetes or whatever. And it's really, well, think about the foods we eat that have sugar. It's actually more we always talk about in the diabetes class, it's more the fat, but because there's really no, except for like red vines or gummy bears, there's really nothing that we eat that has a lot of sugar that doesn't also have a lot of fat, right? Donuts, people think of donuts as a carb. It's like, well, no, most of the calories are fat in a donut, not sugar. I mean, there's a lot of sugar too, but most of the calories are actually from fat, because fat is 9 calories per gram and carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram. Protein is also 4 calories per gram, but fat is 9 calories per gram and alcohol is 7 calories per gram. So it's just, you get way more calories per bite when we're eating things that have added fat, even more so than sugar, but it doesn't make sugar healthy, just kind of something to kind of keep in mind. And then cookies are 2,000 calories a pound. Now there's one actually, I think Oreo cookies are 2,400 calories in a pound of Oreo cookies. So in case you were curious, not that anyone's ever eaten maybe a pound of Oreo cookies, but that would be 2,400 calories. Chips, 2,300 calories a pound. Nuts and seeds, so look at that, 2,800 calories a pound. So that's why we always say maybe, Dr. Greger, maybe a quarter cup of nuts a day, just a small in the palm of your hands, and that's a lot of calories, 2,800 calories in a pound, and it's hard to just eat, to stop eating nuts, right? Because they're so good. And the old days, you basically, this is actually Dr. McDougall would say this, because he said nuts are fine, but just few. And it's kind of like, he goes, yeah, at Christmas time, there would be the little bowl of nuts in their shell, and you'd take the nut cracker and you'd crack open a nut and get to it and eat a couple of nuts. And by the third nut, you bloodied your knuckles from the nutcracker, and you're like, okay, that's good enough. I'll eat some more next holiday, right? So it's kind of like that. But now what we have these big bags at Costco with added oil and salt, and it's just this huge thing. It's ready to go, and just tons of nuts. So you have to be careful there if you're trying to lose weight. And then we talked about butter, 3,200 calories a pound, and oil, 4,000 calories a pound. So before I give you some examples and we get to the videos, does anyone have any questions about what calorie density is, and any questions about this graph so far? Is it kind of shocking to see it? To see the difference between the right-hand side of the chart and left-hand side? So obviously, which side of the chart do you want to be mostly eating on? Left-hand side, right? And so you see this green line that comes down, about 500 calories a pound. I'll talk about it more later, but that's what the evidence shows of all those studies they did, all those controlled feeding experiments, is when you want to shoot for about 500 calories a pound. And so if you're eating the way Charlie and I are teaching, a whole food plant-based diet, so your fruits, vegetables, beans, intact whole grains, a few nuts and seeds, some herbs and spices, starchy vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, you're totally everything I just mentioned is essentially 600 calories a pound or less. Everything I just talked about, 100% whole food plant-based diet is all 600 calories per pound or less. And so you're going to automatically be in the ideal range when I show you the specific numbers on the studies for being a healthy weight. What's the ideal calorie density people should shoot for? And again, this is eating as much as you want. You don't have to portion control. So I want to give you some examples, because I think it's good to kind of wrap your mind around, okay, give me a couple of examples. So since we talked about appetite, I want to bring that back in here. So the standard American diet, when we review like the average standard American diet, guess just by looking at this chart, does anyone have a guess? What's the number of calories per pound on the average standard American diet? Does anyone have an idea how many calories per pound that would be if you're eating mostly the standard American diet, maybe with some fruits and vegetables? Anyone have a guess? How many? 20,000 per pound. Because so the average person's eating anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 calories a day, kind of the average. But again, it's so hard to estimate because everyone's so different and calorie counting is so inaccurate. But so giving that as a ballpark, what do you think is the calories per pound on the average standard American diet? pretty close, 2,000. So it's actually around 1,500, between 1,200 and 1,500 is kind of what studies have shown per pound. And so then another thing you might find interesting when they do these feeding experiments is individual people eat the same amount of food from day to day. So there's going to be differences. A small petite female that's inactive versus a larger male that's has more muscle and is more active. There's going to be some variation, but most humans eat between 3 and 5 pounds of food per day. And so some people are, probably as an average, and to make math easy, we'll just stick with 3 pounds because that's kind of probably pretty close to average. Some people eat a little more, like I was mentioning, the differences for people, but every individual person eats about the same number of pounds of food per day. So it makes it easy to go, okay, well, let's just say I'm an average person. I eat about 3 pounds of food a day. So I'm probably, if I'm eating 3 squares a day, I'm probably eating about a pound of food per meal, about 3 pounds per day. And it might vary a little bit. But if you think about when they do the feeding experiments, usually about a pound of food in the stomach is usually enough to stretch the stretch receptors, make you feel full. So let's kind of keep that in our mind. About 3 pounds of food a day is what most people will eat to feel full and satisfied and whatnot. So now let's do a little bit of math here. So let's go with a little bit on the higher end. Let's say 1,500 calories in a pound, standard American diet. So if you're eating 1,500 calories per pound and you're eating 3 pounds of food a day, how many calories are you eating in a day? 4,500, right? Because 1,500 times 3 is 4,500. So 4,500 calories, that's quite a bit, right? You can see why almost 90% of Americans are overweight or obese. And so pretty easy to see that. And so if you think about, okay, so if I'm eating a whole food plant-based diet and I'm eating also 3 pounds of food, and I'm eating about 500 calories a pound, how many calories is that? 500 calories times 3 pounds. 1,500. Wow, what a huge difference, right? Both people are eating the exact same amount of food. Both people have the exact same receptor appetite satiation in their body physiologically as each other, but one's getting that many more calories than the other, right? And so, gosh, if somebody's eating only 1,500 calories and they're already at their ideal weight, they probably are going to have to eat more. If they're active too, they're probably eating 4 or 5 pounds of food a day. And you always hear about people, Charlie and I talk about this in class all the time, that you actually eat more to weigh less. Because if you're eating higher volumes of lower calorie density foods, you're going to be eating a lot more volume of food to get to feel full and satisfied. Because there's also, besides those stretch receptors we talked about, there's those density receptors, right? So think about if you were say you were trying to get 1,500 calories a day, and all you ate was non-starchy vegetables, 100 calories a pound. How many pounds of non-starchy vegetables would you have to eat a day to get 1,500 calories? 15 pounds. Who's going to be able to eat 15 pounds of food in a day? No. And that's why you don't want to just be eating just salads and fruit and then eating over here, because you're getting a lot of good nutrients down there, but you're not getting very many calories down there. And so you're going to be so hungry, you're going to be going down here to eat these foods to fill you up. When that's why, like Dr. McDougall talks so much about starch-based diet with the addition of vegetables, because the starches are about 500 to 600 calories a pound. And so if you're eating, say you're even eating 600 calories a pound all day, to get 1,800 calories would be 3 pounds, right? So you'd still be doing good, right? So if you think about the balance of starchy vegetables with the intact grains and the fruits and other vegetables, you're going to be in this ideal range, about 500 calories a pound, eating as much as you want. And another example I want to give, before I see if you guys have any questions before we move forward, is, have you guys heard about like, anyone ever watch like Dr. Now Zardin, the 600-pound life, that show? Because he tends to put people on a 1,200 calorie a day diet before he does their bariatric surgery. And it's usually low carb, because that's kind of what most bariatric surgeons recommend. And so, because it does help with weight loss, but and not healthy, it's a topic for another talk. But so 1,200 calories a pound. So think about, okay, so if I'm eating 1,200 calories a day and I'm eating 1,500 calories a pound, because I'm eating even just eating the standard American diet, let's just say you're maybe not doing, even if you're doing low carb, you're eating a lot of food here, the meat, but you're also eating cheese. You might still be getting some oil, maybe some butter, probably not a lot of, you're trying to avoid processed food, and you are eating some vegetables. They usually restrict fruit. But so you're still probably well over 1,000 calories a pound on your overall diet, could be even higher. And if say you're just trying to follow a 1,200 calorie a day diet and you're eating the standard American diet, so how much volume of food do you get in a day? You're eating 1,500 calories a pound, but you only get to eat 1,200 calories. How much volume of food are you going to get in a day? Less than a pound, right? Do you see that? Less than a pound of food, because 1,500 calories per pound, but you're only getting 1,200 calories. So you're not even eating a pound of food. How happy do you think that person's going to be? How happy is your stretch receptors in your stomach? You're not going to be happy at all, right? But if you're eating 1,200 calories a day and you're eating, say you're even being really strict and really even going, even kind of keeping your portions a little bit lower on the starchy vegetables and the beans a little bit lower, and you're really hitting the non-starchy vegetables pretty hard, you could easily be down around 400 calories a pound. And so 400 calories a pound, 1,200 calories, how many pounds of food is that person getting? 3, right? So who's going to be happier, the person eating 3 pounds or the person eating less than a pound in a day, right? So it's a good, is that kind of making sense? You see how important calorie density is? It's everything. And so, so any questions about this before I want to kind of show you guys some examples of looking at volume of food, same number of calories. So like on the right-hand side will be like, I think the first one's 100 calories on the right and 100 calories on the left. Which one's going to fill you up more? And this is giving you examples of what the impact that calorie density has. Yeah. Right, so 500 calories a pound, it ended up being, so when they let everybody in these controlled experiments eat as much as they wanted to, so we know no one was portion controlling, everyone was eating till satisfied. 500 calories was where they were overweight, they were losing weight. If they were already normal weight, they maintained their weight and they felt full and satisfied. And I'll show you my last slide will have a little more specific breakouts and how much exercise people were getting and whether they lost weight or not. So I'll show you those at the end. But yeah, so you're exactly right. That's why that green light is there, because that's what the studies. I think there was over 80 studies they did, these controlled feeding experiments, and where all these buffets of all these different options that had different calorie densities of what people got to choose from. And so when they controlled for all that, so they weren't, they're essentially locked up. So there's no access to any other food. So they knew they weren't getting any other food other than what they were serving there. So other questions before I move forward? Okay, let's do. Oh, that was it. It's not letting me advance the slide, whatever. It was just moving the slide itself. How do I do it forward? Okay, we go. Just down arrow. Okay.
Foods equal calories. All you got to do is see which one is more filling. Okay. So we got 2 little soy chicken nuggets, and we got 1 1/4 cups of vegetable lentil soup. Don't say anything yet. There are people still thinking on this one, okay? We'll give them a few minutes. Everybody think they got an answer? Which one do you think? The soup. Now, if you went to medical school or dietetic school or you studied biochemistry and physiology, they would tell you all different things about what fills you up. You might hear about chemicals and hormones and enzymes like CCK and ghrelin, and leptin. You might hear fat is more filling and all these other things, right? Just forget about it. Just pretend you just walked in off the street, which I think many of you did. You just walked in off the street. You don't know anything about biochemistry, chemistry, food, or anything. Just take a wild guess. What do you think it is about the vegetable lentil soup that will fill you up more than the soy chicken nuggets? Anybody? Volume. Man, there's just more of it. And it turns out that's right. They actually did these studies where they fed people equal calories of food to see which was the most filling. And they did it short-term, long-term, subjective, and objectively. So pretty good studies. And they found out that all foods that fill you up have 3 things in common. And can anybody guess what number 1 was? Reading my props, huh? Number one was water, and that kind of makes sense because what does water take up a lot of? Space. And filling up the space in the stomach actually contributes to satiety. Because as you'll learn more about this weekend, on the outside of the stomach, you have these little nerves called stretch receptors. And when you fill the stomach up, they stretch a little, they send signals to the brain, which help release all those chemicals telling you you're, right? Don't you all like to get that feeling of full? So water is very important. Water helps, gives you that, and water also has a lot of weight, which helps give that stretch. Because some things have lots of volume, but they don't have a lot of weight, right? Like air. So water was very important. Anybody want to guess what number 2 was? That's right. Fiber. Now, fiber doesn't make sense when you think about it like water does, because fiber doesn't take up a lot of space, it doesn't have a lot of volume. But do you know what you get when you mix a lot of water and a lot of fiber together? You know what you get? You get a lot of, did you say gas? That's true. You get a lot of gas in the beginning. But you get something called bulk, right? And it turned out that bulk was the biggest contributor to your feeling full. Now, nutrients did play a role. You do have these nutrient receptors, and nutrients were important, but it turns out they're not the most important. So when they tell you to eat a diet high in protein or high in fat because that'll fill you up the most, it's not true. I could take 2 foods with the exact same amount of protein in them, and guess which one will fill you up more? The one that has the most bulk. Right. Think about that. So it's not just the protein or the fat, and I'm going to show you here in a minute. Okay, you ready? Okay, we have a cup of cashews, and we have 6 small baked potatoes. Do not say anything yet. So, with salsa. That's correct. Somebody, yeah, with salsa. We'll leave it at that. Okay, which one do you think will fill you up more? The potatoes. Why? What do the potatoes have more of that the cashews do? Bulk. Now, are these high in fat? Yeah, they're 75% fat. Is this low in fat? It's 1% fat. So is fat filling? No, not at all. Now, does this make cashews fattening? No, not necessarily. What if you ate just 1 or 2 cashews? That's not right. You're right. We know nobody does that. Okay, now I'm going to do some other comparisons. You ready? So this one was pretty easy. Enough said over there, right? Okay, look at this one. Oh, we did this one already, but I want to make another point. Is this high in fat? 70, 80%. Is this low in fat? Under 10. So is fat what filled you up? What filled you up? The bulk. Everybody got that? Here we go. 2 low-fat fig Newmans, not to mention anybody in particular, and 1 small cantaloupe. They're both 140 calories. You see the difference? Which would fill you up more? The cantaloupe. Now let me ask you a question. In 1980, you heard you should go on a low-fat diet, right? So you go to the supermarket or the whole food store, and you find all these low-fat foods, and you fill up on those. Do you see the problem? If you eat all you want, what happened to your caloric intake? It's too high. But what if you eat just the right amount of calories? Then what's happened? Now you're hungry all day long. Is that going to happen with these foods? Now, just for the record, do you know that the percentage of fat, carb, and protein is almost identical? They almost have the same ratio. So is it the ratio or the amount of protein, the carb, or the fat that fills you up? Because those two are pretty equal. What fills you up more? Bulk. It's simple. Look at this one. Here's a... On the left, we have a 2-pound fresh pineapple. On the right, we have 4 ounces of gummy bears. Both are 450 calories. Now I put this one up there because everybody's anti-sugar these days, right? You can't have sugar, sugar's no good, can't have carbs. And I think that's crazy because, you know, sugar's good for you. I mean, does everybody know what the best fuel for your body is? Gummy bears. Make a note of that. I got to fix the slide, okay? Gummy bears. Right. What's the fuel that your body runs on, the preferred fuel? What do you? Glucose. That's a fancy name for sugar. Now, your body will also burn another fuel. Anybody know what it is? Fat. Whoever said it is correct. The two fuels your body likes to burn, number one is sugar, number two is fat. Now, every now and then you hear somebody say, I need some energy. I got to get some protein. Right? You ever hear that? Well, just realize when somebody tells you that, they just told you they know nothing about physiology and biochemistry, because that's not what your body wants to use for energy. And in fact, it's a difficult process. Your body uses carbs first, and secondary is fat. So, you know, when you work out, some of you get exercise, your muscles burn up some carb, and they also burn up some fat. And some of us are looking to burn up a little bit more fat, right? But there's parts of your body that can't burn fat. Parts of your body can only burn sugar, glucose. And anybody know what part of your body it is? The brain. That's why I don't get it when people are so anti-sugar and they want to avoid sugar. I mean, I don't know about them, but my brain, very important to me. And it needs sugar every day. And they've actually done studies. I mean, there's recommended minimum intakes of sugar just to fuel the brain. Anybody know how much that is, the recommended minimum intake of sugar you need just to fuel the average brain? 500 calories a day just to fuel the average brain. Now, I had mine tested. Mine burns about 750 a day, but oh, I'm smart. You're very nice. Because the last time I was here, somebody raised their hand and said, why? Is yours less efficient? Why is that funny? I said, don't make fun of me. I have the props. Okay, so is sugar the problem, or is the package the problem? I mean, these both have the same amount of calories and the same amount of sugar. Are they equal to you? No. What's 90% of the weight and volume of the pineapple you're going to eat there? Water, fiber, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and a great package and great matrix, just right for you. What's 90% of the weight and the volume of this? Sugar. So is sugar the problem or the package it came in? It's the package. Don't be afraid of sugar. Once again, get it in its whole natural form. Now, what I think is the real irony is they take foods like this, they process and refine the heck out of them, so we're left with this white crystalline powder, which is sweet, but doesn't really have a flavor. It's just sweet. So then they make it into things like this, but to get kids to eat it, what do they flavor it as? This. Does anybody see that irony? Just give them the pineapple. So then we have people who have been loading up on these for 20 years. They got heavy. And then what do they say? I can't eat pineapple. It has sugar in it. So, okay, here's a few more I just want to show you so you can get the point. Every one of them will be 200 calories. That's a pat of butter, in case you forgot what it looked like. And those are grapes, 200 calories. Which would be better for you? Which would be more filling? Which would have more fiber, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and everything. Okay, here we have a little bit of almonds. Here we have carrots. Same 200 calories. See the difference? So you see the problem if we put bowls of almonds out in the back? It's we would have this room packed. It's not that almonds are bad for you, but what would happen to all of you? We would overeat. And it's not your fault. So, here we go again. French fries and honeydew melon. See the difference? And which would be better for you? The one on the right. Right. That's olive oil and sliced apples. Same calories. Which would fill you up more? Which would be healthier? Right. There's broccoli and pretzels. Are you drooling over the broccoli now or the pretzels? This was the red meat guy, so I'm trying to figure it out. See the difference? Now, I'm not saying you should only eat raw broccoli. I'm just making a point. And is everybody getting the point? Okay, good, because now it gets harder. Hershey Kisses and those little red peppers we occasionally have out in the back. See why we put the peppers out? No. Okay, potato chips and celery. Every now and then somebody says, you know, I'm really enjoying this diet, but I would like something crunchy. And I'm like, eat crisp celery, it's very crunchy. And they say, no, 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 I want something that's crunchy and kind of has like a salty flavor. So I said, eat crisp celery. It's crunchy and kind of has a salty flavor. And they say, no, that's not quite what I want. And I say, just admit it. You want potato chips. Okay.
Yeah, so this Fatful lecture is like an hour and 19 minutes. So it's on the class website under videos. And I probably watched it so many years ago, but 8 or 9 times before I didn't pick up something new. There's so much in there. He talks about protein and carbohydrates in more detail and calorie density in more detail. Goes through the chart and all, like I did. But so I always had all my patients that are trying to lose weight. I always told them to watch that every 3 months until they reach their goal weight, and then if they're struggling to continue to lose or they're starting to gain again, then watch it again, because it's just a really good just reinforcement of that. And there's so much you can get out of it. So definitely recommend that. So any questions about those videos before I go on to the calorie density breakouts here that I was referring to earlier? Making sense? Okay. So this is what the results of those feeding experiments were. So the groups of people that only ate foods that are 400 calories per pound or less, so you could kind of remembering from the chart, right? So that'd be your fruits and vegetables, most of the intact whole grains, some beans, but overall we're gorging as much as they wanted from 400 calories a pound or less foods. They all lost weight even without any exercise, completely sedentary. But I would have to say it's probably pretty difficult to be that low, because you would have to be even portion on the intact grains and the beans and potatoes. You wouldn't be able to eat too much volume of those foods. You'd have to really be hitting the non-starchy vegetables really hard, and fruits and things like that. But most of us aren't completely sedentary. So if you were in the 400 to 800 calories per pound zone, if that's where you were eating as much as you wanted, of 400 to 800 calories per pound foods, everyone lost weight as long as you did at least 30 to 60 minutes of exercise per day. And that was like moderate intensity. So just go for a 30-minute brisk walk, just kind of general what most of us could probably achieve. So I would say, again, that sweet spot kind of is that around that 500 calorie a pound. So I think if you're eating way Charlie and I are teaching in this class, a whole food plant-based diet, not eating too many nuts and seeds, avoiding oils, avoiding processed foods, would be pretty darn easy to be in that 400 to 800 calories per pound zone. So again, you're eating as much as you want, and you're still going to be losing weight as long as you're getting that 30 to 60 minutes of exercise per day. People that were in the 800 to 1200 calories per pound, they all gained weight except for the extreme heavy exercisers. So they had people that were, almost like marathon runner levels. So they're running on treadmills and just intense exercise. And everyone gained weight. The people that were the heavy exercisers maintained weight. They didn't gain, but they didn't lose either. And then 1200 calories per pound and up, everybody gained weight, even the heavy exercisers. So there's the standard American diet for you, right? So if you're eating 1200 calories per pound, eating all that you want, then you're not gonna be able to lose weight, and you're gonna gain weight. So that's the thing. And we know that when it comes to weight loss, there's I always talk about there's 3 basic philosophies when it comes to weight loss, and really every diet kind of falls into that category. Remember, health mentality, not diet mentality, but lifestyle, if you want to say it that way. But we have portion control and things that drugs that affect appetite. So the GLP-1s, the phentermine to suppress your appetite. Even some of the drugs that help curb cravings and things. Those work a little bit different mechanism, but in the brain, we can talk more about that with the food addiction. But then you're always trying to portion control. Then it's basically it's suppress the appetite. The appetite's kind of the enemy. You need to suppress the appetite with drugs. You need to portion control, because the only way you could really portion control calories is to portion, and you're fighting against your appetite all the time. So that's why it's never going to be sustainable, because we're always having to try to, our appetite's our enemy, and we're always battling against that. And so that's why people then will take drugs and stuff to suppress their appetite. So that's kind of one camp, one philosophy. The next would be low carb. So using like ketosis, which is essentially putting you in a state of illness, because ketosis is not a natural state. It's a state that we have survived on when we've had to fast, because we were hunters and gatherers, and we sometimes would have to go a week without eating. And so we needed ketones in our brain, like Jeff Novick just talked about there. We have to have, only sugar can fuel the brain, and ketones are a type of sugar from burning fat. So if you cut your carbohydrates low enough, eat a high enough amount of protein and fat, you can put your body into this ketosis. You end up losing some fat, but you also lose muscle mass, because the muscle gets broken down in the liver, and then you end up with ketones from fat and from protein breakdown, and that fuels the brain, the ketones. And so the high ketone levels actually will suppress your appetite. So having a state of ketosis suppresses your appetite. Again, that's a survival mechanism. Think about it. And a lot of times when people are in ketosis, or they're fasting, essentially fasting because there's no food, actually a lot of times we'll feel a state of euphoria after 2 or 3 days. And that's a survival mechanism too, because if we just curled up in a ball because there's no food, we would have just starved to death. And so you actually feel pretty good. You actually have energy. Your body's in this state of ketosis, and you can go forage for food. And because again, it's not a state that the body is designed to be in for a long term. It's just for a temporary measure. And this is an interesting thing for those that are kind of knowledgeable on keto, that kind of stuff, is that there's only one population of people that have ever been tried like on a sustained ketogenic type of a diet, and it's the Inuit Eskimos. And because there's a time of the year where all they can really survive on is seal meat and blubber, so all they're eating is fat, and they have no access to plants and things like that. And so they, for generations, they've had to adapt to being kind of in ketosis. What's interesting is they actually have a genetic mutation that does not allow them to stay in ketosis. They do still assimilate the nutrients and stuff that they need to survive, but they have like some sort of mutation that keeps them from a prolonged state of high ketosis, because again, it's not a state the body is healthy in long term. And actually, they're not healthy people either. They have lots of osteoporosis and heart disease and diabetes and things like that amongst their tribe as well. So it's just to throw that out there. But so that's the second camp, and people can lose weight short term on that, because you're losing a lot of water initially. You do lose some fat, you lose some muscle mass, and again, talk more about that another time. So that's the second kind of philosophy. Then the third and final is the calorie density approach, which, I mean, to me, it seems like makes the most sense, because you don't have to fight against your appetite. Your appetite's not your enemy. It's just choosing the right foods that are high in nutrient. Because the thing that's really interesting about that graph is the foods that are the lowest in calorie density are the highest in nutrient density. So are any of you guys familiar with Dr. Joel Fuhrman? He's one of so he has a little formula called H equals N over C. It's a math formula. H meaning health, N meaning nutrients over calories. So the N is in the numerator and the C is in the denominator. So health, the higher the health, the higher the nutrients, the higher the numerator, and the lower the calories, the higher the H, the health, right? So the higher the health is foods that are high in nutrients, low in calories. So that goes with that calorie density graph. So the foods that happen to be the lowest in calorie density happen to be the highest in nutrient density. So you're getting to eat as much as you want. You're just choosing to eat the foods that are around 500 calories a pound or less, and just kind of what you learned tonight. So that's kind of, any questions about those breakouts or anything we talked about tonight? The rest of the time is just for questions. You guys can we can do a group discussion, small groups if you want, about anything. You guys just want to kind of reiterate what you learned in class. We could do a small group, or we could just do a general session overall, next 15 minutes. If you questions, thoughts about calorie density. What, someone name one thing they learned about calorie density that was like surprised them, or had anyone ever heard of calorie density before tonight? Raise your hand if you'd heard of calorie density. Okay. Did you really know what it was, or you just kind of heard of it? Chart.
I was surprised at the
Yeah.
chart.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard study of people in the
Yeah.
hotel. That's say,
Right. So people were saying they hadn't heard of the study, the feeding experiments. Sometimes they can't hear in the Zoom when you guys talk. So I try to restate what you said. So yeah, having feeding experiments, I think, is really important, because doing nutrition studies is really hard, because you're always trying to control for confounding variables. Are people really eating what you're, if you send them the meals and that's all they're eating, how do you know that's all they're eating? Or you're doing like food questionnaires. It is hard to do nutrition studies. So having those controlled experiments where you're like they call them medical ward experiments, where you're basically just locked in. And so it'd be nice to get locked into a 5-star hotel and they provide all your food for you and everything. So yeah. For those, yeah. I don't know if they'd start, I imagine they're still doing some of those, but I think Barbara Rolls is retired now, but yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Logically, or in my body, what's happening? Why do I have such a sugar crash?
Well, I mean, so alcohol is a lot of calories, so 7 calories in a gram of alcohol. And one of the things with calorie density that doesn't quite follow the rules would be like alcohol in liquid form, and soda pop would be kind of a similar thing, because it's got a lot of calories. It does take up space, but it's not, so it doesn't always follow it's not really those are the few things that don't make sense when it comes to calorie density, but again, those aren't natural foods either. So it's just, you think about it, it's just calories, it's liquid, so it does take up space, but it doesn't really satisfy hunger either. And so that's why some people will say Diet Coke versus regular Coke, but because there's less calories, but then it still stimulates the brain. So some studies show one, it affects the gut microbiome in a negative way, and it can also cause cravings. And so I don't know if it's necessarily the sugar in the grapes, or if it's the alcohol. It could cause a bit of a craving. And then also with the artificial sweeteners, yeah, it tricks the brain, because it's like you taste sweet, but then there's no calories that came in. So then a lot of times people will then crave more sugar. So I don't know if it has to do with it's a trigger for you as an individual, or if there's anything more physiologic about it. I'm not sure. Yeah. 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 So the question is about how you look at your plate and you're thinking about calorie density. And so I guess you look at it as, depends on where, if you want maximum weight loss, so it's always going to be tricky, because if you drive your calorie density too low on your plate. So if you just look at a plate and go, because usually like Dr. McDougall would say, at least half the plate, you're trying to lose weight. If you're maintaining weight, he would say 2/3 of your plate should be starchy vegetables. The other third is non-starchy vegetables, fruit for dessert, just water, tea, or coffee for your beverage, and that's it. But that's kind of for maintaining weight. For his kind of maximal weight loss, he would say 50% of your plate starchy vegetables, the other 50% non-starchy vegetables, still fruit for dessert, and same for the beverages. And because that would average out, that would probably average you out about 450 to 500 calories per pound, that plate, by kind of looking at it percentages of what you're doing starchy vegetables. And again, with starchy vegetables, he would include beans and intact whole grains, not just potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, squash. I mean, we all know those are starchy vegetables, but I think he would also agree kind of putting intact whole grains and beans into the kind of this, because they are technically starches. And so, because all a starch is a storage organ for a plant. So it's the basically the carbohydrate storage for the plant that grew above it, right? So it's just an energy depot. And so that's what's really going to fill you up. So I have patients that just eat big salads all the time, and they're still afraid of starches. They won't eat potatoes and beans and grains because they think there's too many carbs, they'll make them fat. Even though I try to tell them, no, it's, you really need those starches. And they'll just do, the broccoli and the kale and the lettuce and big salads, and they won't include starchy vegetables. And then they're wondering why they're starving all the time. And because they're not getting enough calories, their calorie density is too low. And so then they start saying they crave, I ended up having cheese or meat or chicken or chips or, cookie, they start eating the processed foods because they're too hungry. It's like, when if they just would have still avoided those foods because those are unnatural and or have more drug-like effects, whereas nobody's gonna get a dopamine surge from eating sweet potatoes, right? So no one's gonna go to the store at 2 o'clock in the morning when they had a stressful day and binge on sweet potatoes, right? But they're gonna binge on ice cream or donuts or cookies or something like that, right? And so but why would they be afraid of the sweet potatoes? The sweet potatoes, about 500 calories in a pound, so lots of nutrients, and so it's not going to give you that unnatural drug-like effect, but that goes into the pleasure trap stuff, which we can talk about as well. But I hope that answers your question as far as, I guess, don't worry about. I mean, maybe you can think about, okay, half my plate is about 500 calories a pound or 600 calorie a pound category, and the other half is 100 to 200 calories per pound category. So I'm kind of balancing out. One of the things Jeff Novick talks about if you watch the full lecture, and also in the volumetrics book by Barbara Rolls, is to kind of like what you go back for seconds for. So if you say, okay, and Dr. Greger talks about it in his 21 Tweaks a lot, preloading calories. You can preload foods that have like negative calories, even though they do still have calories. Like if you drank a glass of water and ate an apple before you sat down for your meal, you end up eating less of the food that you had for dinner. And so even if the food you had for dinner is really healthy, but maybe it's more like 500 to 600 calories a pound, but because you ate a salad or a small salad for your meal or an apple and drank some water, you end up eating a smaller amount of the foods that were 600-ish calories per pound. Or then if you ate a meal that was 400 to 500 calories a pound and you're still hungry, instead of going back for more, say, pasta that was 600 calories a pound, you went back for another salad or another potato or something, which it was only like 400 calories a pound, right? So you can kind of go back for seconds on foods that are even lower in calorie density as a strategy to try to get less calories but fill yourself up.
Yeah, Marcia.
Oh, question in the
Yeah,
chat.
no, I don't have a question. I just noticed that when I ate a salad every day, I lost about 8 pounds really quick. I mean, it was amazing the way you lose it. And I thought, wow. And I have maintained that. I had Chef AJ's disappearing lasagna, and that's mostly vegetables, spinach, and that kind of stuff. And I ate a lot of that, and I didn't gain any weight at all. So I do know that this is so true, is when you eat the less amount, you don't gain weight. Or eat
You all hear that?
Hear that? Yeah. And the other thing to do with the salad too is, so what I tell my patients then that they're sold on the salad and stuff, but they're still hungry, is start adding at least kind of doing it backwards from what Dr. McDougall would recommend. He says starch as your base, and also that remember the meal building basics handout I talked about last week, starting with a starch, adding vegetables. That's kind of more what Dr. McDougall would be. But if you're not sold on that or it doesn't work for you, you could also, when you have a big salad, you add a bunch of starch to it. So you can do those little baby red potatoes, fingerling potatoes, open up a $1 can of beans, throw beans on there, cook up some quinoa, brown rice, throw those. So you can add a bunch of starch to your salad. And now it's going to increase the calorie density, but in a fashion that's going to make you feel more full and satisfied. Whereas if you just left those things off, you could just be eating 2 or 3 salads. You'd just be so sick of salad that you would not, probably stick with it. So if you at least put the starch on top of that, it's going to increase the calories, but also increase the nutrients, increase the fiber, everything else, because there's like beans have 7 grams of fiber in a half a cup. So that's the fiber winner is the beans. And so more fiber, more water, that's what gives you full and makes you full. Oh yeah.
There's a lot of confusion. And probably one of the main reasons that you're coming here. How many of you have been told portion control? Eat smaller portions. Most all of us, yes? So what were you told tonight? Eat more. How does that compute in your brain? Huh? Huh?
She likes it. Or to weigh less.
Yeah, eat more, weigh less. Does this make sense to you, the difference between calorie density and portion control? Because if it doesn't, the next time you go to your doctor and they tell you, what are you going to be thinking? Are you going to be thinking, gee, they don't really get this? Are you going to tell them that? Or are you going to just smile very nicely and say, yeah, okay, and go and do what you need to do? What you learn that calorie density is more important concept than this portion control. What has happened with portion control to our population? We just keep getting bigger. Sorry, I interrupted. You had a question.
Well, so the question's about probiotics, and we can talk about how it fits into weight loss, kind of what you were saying earlier. But the studies on probiotics, one, they're not really, you don't really know what's in them because they're not regulated, and then you don't know how many of them are active and how they survive. And one of the analogies I always like to give is most of what we consider the good bacteria for our colon, they feed on fiber. And so the analogy I've given before, I might have said it last week, is if you if you had a little shed with 2 rabbits in it and you threw pork rinds in there, a week later, the 2 rabbits would be dead. There's no rabbits, and because they don't eat pork rinds. And so if you throw carrots in there, pretty soon you have 4 rabbits, 8 rabbits, 16 rabbits, right? Because that's what they eat, right? And so somebody that's eating a standard American diet, you take a probiotic, but you don't really know what you're getting because it's not regulated by the FDA. And is it really active culture, and is it really good? It's not going to matter, because if you're not feeding those good bacteria their food, they're just going to die off. And so they haven't really been shown to be really effective in good studies. Sometimes there's like Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, the fiber fuel guy, the gastroenterologist, there's certain situations he still uses them here and there. But I think to answer your question is that if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, you're going to select for the bugs that are the healthy ones. And when Charlie does his fiber class, you're going to see the science, and you're going to see the 2 enterotypes, the Prevotella, the Bacteroides, the different species of bacteria that people get. And we do know that there are studies where you take, mostly in mice though, you take the obese mouse and you transfer their gut microbiome to a skinny mouse, the skinny mouse becomes fat. And then vice versa, you take the gut microbiome of the thin mouse and put it into the heavy mouse will lose weight. So, but that, we don't know that works for humans, but there's something there. And so we know that we think a lot of that has to do with the types of bacteria that you have in your colon. So, some of it's epigenetics, passing along in genetics basically, and then your environment you live in, whether you're you're out in the environment or you're in a sterile environment, your diet, your stress, all these things play into the gut microbiome, and that's a huge area of science, scientific study right now. So I think it does definitely have a huge role to play. But I don't, yeah, but studies haven't shown that taking a probiotic is going to be of any help. It's going to be what you eat and what you feed those good bugs is going to make the biggest difference for whether you're healthy and a healthy weight. Right. That's Dr. Will be 30 different plants per week is kind of what he puts as a benchmark, which isn't as hard as you think when you think about herbs and spices and all the different, if you think about a salad or just think about all the food you ate in a day, every single different plant counts for that. And so you want to have a wide variety of whole plant foods to have a wide gut microbiome, to have a really healthy gut microbiome. And that's going to play a lot of role in your health, not just your weight. Yeah, I guess we're at time. Is any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Or tell them I agree. I should eat less of processed foods, right? So foods that are, I mean, the exceptions being, so like when I talked about the soda, calorie density makes it look not as bad as it really is. And with nuts and seeds, it makes it look worse than it is, right? So it's because nuts and seeds are healthy, but as long as we just eat a small amount of them, it's fine. But when it comes to soda, we really shouldn't drink it at all because it doesn't look as harmful on calorie density, but it's just empty calories and it's lighting up our brain. It's more like a drug in the body, not a food. So nothing that was natural in our environment. But yeah, Kobe, come back next week, and then in 2 weeks I'll dive into food addiction and behavior change. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and those online, good to see you.
Hey, you're welcome. Welcome.